I put my hand to my face. I look down. There's purple blood pouring out of my face. And I look up at an officer standing next to me. And I said in so many words, did I just get shot in the face?
Former cop Cameron McKay knows all about shit shows. In fact, he's got a podcast with nearly the same name as mine. So far for the podcast, I've recorded more than 100 episodes, and this has to be one of my favourites. Not because it's such a wild ride, which it is, but because there is so much gold in here. Make sure you stay for all of it.
I was in special operations. I had been on the force for 5 years. And in 2015, it wasn't a great time to be a police officer in the States. A lot of people had some bad feelings about the police. That was very public. It was being brought up in different scenarios, different calls, different circumstances. And I happened to be in St. Louis when one of these things happened in Ferguson, Missouri. I'd probably been up there about 5 times. And the first time was crazy. I mean, we're talking about getting shot at, helicopters getting shot at, dumpsters on fire, buildings being robbed 1 block away from us, but we can't get to them because there's so many protesters. Everything's just going berserk. I thought someone was going to get hurt that night. Thankfully, no one did. Everything ended up shaking out okay. So this was kind of happening on a repetitive basis over about a year. And on the 5th time that I went up there, it was probably the quietest time I had ever been. And the way it worked is you went to the rear of the Ferguson Police Department and you checked in to let them know who you were, what department you work for, and what your DSN number is. That's the number that identifies you within your department. So I gave it to them and walked to the front of the department where I met with, I would say there's probably 50 police officers there. And I was told to kind of get to the end of the line, standing in the grass, and just kind of stand in the line of police officers, which was facing out over a street with protesters on the other side. And the main thing we were there to do is if they got in this road, which was a 4-lane road, it was our job to get them out of the road, make sure no one gets hurt. They have the right to protest. We do our thing over here. No big deal. And I probably got there around midnight and checked in again. I'm standing on the grass, looking out at these protesters. Nothing's really happening. They're actually barbecuing across the street. I can smell it. It smells good. It seems like it's going to be a good night. And as I'm standing there, I see a red car moving from my right to left. And then right when it gets in front of me, it moves. It takes a right turn and starts going away from me and up a hill. And I looked to my left and I saw a CNN crew there. And for whatever reason, I heard in my head, Grandma would want you to look at that red car. So as I looked at that red car, and no thought like that has ever happened, ever on a patrol, ever anything like that. And I just looked at the red car. And as I looked at the red car, I got hit with something across my face. I thought I got hit by a bat, like someone snuck up on me and hit me with a metal bat across my face. It spun me. And then I hit the ground basically with my butt facing wherever that bat came from. And I put my hand to my face. I look down. There's purple blood pouring out of my face. And I look up at an officer standing next to me. And I said in so many words, did I just get shot in the face? And all he says is officer down into his mic. I can see his eyes. They're the size of plates, right? This is serious. I can hear another officer screaming. It turns out later I found out that he had been shot in the shoulder. But now I know it's real serious. I'm still hearing some gunfire, but I realize I have no time. So I try to sneak in a quick prayer. I wasn't a religious person or anything like that. I wasn't going to church. I wasn't doing anything like that. But I just thought I should sneak one in there really quick. It's like, God, please forgive me for anything I've done wrong. Please watch over my family. Thank you so much for this life. And when I got to the end of the prayer, I was still there. So I was like, okay, so what's the next thing I do? And everyone's hiding. There's no one like jumping on me or anything like that. Everyone's hiding, trying to get away from the gunfire. And so I'm like, well, I should probably move towards the back of the police station. And I thought I wasn't going to get anywhere, but I thought if I at least tried, my family would find out that I didn't lay there kind of like afraid, that I was actually moving, and that might give them something. Again, it was just very quick. And then I kept walking. Nobody went with me. I kept walking. Nobody went with me. I kept walking. And now I get to the back of the police station. And I have my hand on my face. And I said to them, I've been shot. I need help. And the funny thing is they said, you should go to the back of the fire station. And I said, really? So I walk over there. I'm walking up the stairs. The paramedics are running down the stairs. I'm like, awesome. They're running towards me. They run past me. And I have to stop and go, no, 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 no. It's me, 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 me. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And I walk to the ambulance. I jump in the back of the ambulance and basically sit down. I'm like, let's go. And so we're going. And since I'm still here, I'm like, what I should do if I can get a hold of anyone, I should call my sergeant who's on duty because he's got the number to everyone in my family. He can tell them what's going on, if I pass out or if I die. And so I get one of the paramedics to call him and tell him what's going on. And he does all that. I don't talk to my sergeant. And so then we get off the phone. I'm like, all right, what else would I do if I had time? All right, well, if I had time, I'd try to call my wife. So I had them dial. My hand's shaking real bad. I'm like, freaking out. And she doesn't pick up. Don't worry. I didn't leave a message. I didn't say like, honey, this is me. I'm sorry I died, or I'm dying right now. That would have been awful, I think. So I didn't leave a message, but I did then try to call my mom. And it was late. Again, it's like 12:30 now. My mom and dad are in bed, I'm sure, by like 9, 10, whatever it is. But I'm like, I might as well try, So I try, and my mom picks up. She's a English woman. She lives in the United States, but she was born and raised in London. She's like, I'm like, Mom, it's me. I've been shot. I'm probably going to die. I'm so sorry. You're the best mom ever. I love you so much. And in the classic British, like, I don't know where she comes up with it. She's like, Cam, you're going to be okay. And I'm like, I know you got to say that, Mom, and all that kind of stuff, but I love you so much. You're the best mom ever. Please tell Daddy he's the best dad ever. I love you so much. She's like, honey, I'll see you soon. And that's all she said. And then got off the phone with me. It was calming though. It was calming. My mom's good at that. She kind of sets the tone with that. And I guess it's happened since I was a little kid. So it worked in the moment. And at least I got to say the words I wanted to say. I think every police officer has like a short list of what they would do if something really bad happened. And I got to do all of them. I got to talk to my mom. I didn't talk to my wife, but I was able to talk to my mom, who's closest to my wife, so I was able to kind of pass that on through her and all that kind of stuff. I think she was a little used to it. So I had gotten off the phone and I'm start asking the paramedics, am I going to die? Am I going to die? And they're like, no. I go, guys, honestly, if I'm going to die, you have to tell me. You got to tell me. They're like, you're not going to die. I'm like, then you have to sing it. You have to sing, you're not going to die. And he's like, and they're like, huh? I'm like, you're not going to die. You're not going to die. You're not going to die. And they started singing it. So then we get to the hospital and we go into my clothes are off. It's, freezing cold outside. And they come around the corner. There's like 20 doctors waiting for me. And I don't have a second to put a word out. They just go to work on me. And what that means is I believe now they were all assigned a part of my body to thoroughly check and to see if there was any extra holes in or something like that. That includes places you don't want to finger in that moment. Like I was literally saying, you don't need to put your finger up my, what, because I got shot in the face and they're not even listening to me. So they go through all of it. They're doing their thing. They put me in the machine. Eventually they get a scan of my head and it looks like the bullet went through my right cheek, through my head, hit me on the back of the inside of the skull, and then it deflected down into my neck where it came to rest on my carotid artery and jugular. They weren't going to take it out. So they're like, we're not taking it out. We're not accessing that area. And this is once everything had kind of cooled down. I'm still in shock. Like I'm literally looking at people and saying, I caught a bullet with my head. Like that doesn't make sense. And so I'm a little freaked out, but I never passed out or anything like that. And well, they did ask me 8 hours later, would you like to go home? I said, yes, I would. And so I was home 8 hours later with a bullet in my neck, but not before asking a doctor, what's going to happen with this bullet? And a grown doctor looked at me and says, the body tends to reject foreign objects. And I go, hold on, sir. So what you're telling me right now is one day I'm going to be itching my neck and I'm going to pull a bullet out of it. He goes, yep. And I go, as good as that sounds, let's not do that. And thank God, again, my wife found a specialist who later took the bullet out of my neck a week later which actually matched the rifling from the gun recovered at the suspect's house. So physically, I mean, that was pretty much where it ended. Yes, I had to repair. You should have seen me the following day. My face was like swollen out to here, like I was Elephant Man. But it went away, and I didn't have any permanent damage from the actual gunshot. Besides the bone behind your ear being porous, it all breaks and it will eventually mold together. They can't cast it and put it back together, but it didn't, affect me or anything like that. But what really happened from the moment I got home and my head hit the pillow is PTSD showed up in my life right away. And I didn't really know what it was, but I was immediately having dreams of dying where I could taste it, smell it, feel it. I would plead for my life, all these kinds of things. And it was just really alarming. But I didn't want to tell my work because I had also been told by my first sergeant that PTSD happens to people who can't handle situations. That's literally what he said within my first, year. And so I wasn't going to tell anybody that I was struggling, right? I really wasn't going to tell anybody that I was struggling, but I think I was in shock for a good part of like weeks to a month, like just what has happened. Like life is ground to a halt. I'm basically hiding in my house at this point. And the PTSD is happening and I start to drink more. Drinking started kind of leveling me out. And
were you off work at this point?
yes. So I was basically out ill, if you will, for a period. And then I went into where workers' comp was paying for half of my salary kind of deal. So I wasn't fully working at that point. I was disabled or classified disabled, but still working kind of deal. And like I said, in my own time, though, I was drinking. I was basically hiding in the basement. I thought the people for a little bit that had shot me before they had been caught, that they were going to come back and finish the job. So I had windows down. My truck's actually at one point parked in the backyard in case we have to leave really quick. I know if they come from this side, I'm going to drive over this front lawn. If they come from the front, I might go through the backyard through a fence. Like it started getting kind of, I could tell I was being erratic, but I was just hyper focused. And basically like someone was still coming to kill me, and drinking helped. Drinking actually helped. And so I was doing that more and more. I wasn't getting better. I was going to therapy like 3 times a week for PTSD. I was on medications. I was on all these kinds of things. But after 6 months, my department decided that was long enough. And if I couldn't return in the next 30 days full capacity, they would relieve me of my position, which ended up happening. I understand business is business. And it's disappointing when you find out as a police officer that when you get hurt, you become a broken piece of equipment. And broken pieces of equipment don't get paid. So it really kind of took my legs out. To anybody else, it may not, but I really believed in it. I really believed in the team, and I really loved what I did. And, it sent me into a dark place. Suicide was somewhat on the table, never discussed with my family or anything like that. Never discussed with my therapist because she's a mandated reporter. And if you say anything like that, they end up calling the police. So doing all that kind of stuff and just kind of in a super dark place, felt like the biggest victim in the whole world. I did. And I'll address that coming up, but I felt like a victim. I felt like I had been taken advantage of. And I also felt very ashamed. Ashamed of how I had responded to being shot, ashamed of what the position I put my family in, ashamed of how it maybe made my family look, all these kinds of things. And what happened was at the year anniversary of the shooting, it was kind of a weird day. I was just pacing around my house all day. We went to bed and my wife found me in bed having a seizure. And I had never had a seizure before. She said, "I'm calling the paramedics." I said, "No, you're not." I was ready to die. I just wanted the lights to go out. I wanted it to be over. I was in too much physical, spiritual, mental pain. I just wanted it to be done. And at this point, I had no concept of a spiritual or God or anything like that. I thought it was all just not true. So I'm having seizures. Then she calls EMS, although I don't want her to. EMS is in my house and I'm telling them to leave. And now the police are in my house. They start asking my wife if I beat her. They're starting to ask her where my weapons are, all these kinds of things. So it's blowing up. And I know I'm about to become the worst case scenario for a call. And one of the police officers was really smart. He looked at me and he says, "Does your wife deserve to be this scared?" And I said, "No." He said, "Will you please get your blood pressure taken? Go out to the ambulance, get it taken. And when you're done, we'll get out of here." And I believed him, as I'm having a seizure on the way out to the ambulance. They take my blood pressure. It's about 220 over 120. So they think I'm about to have a stroke. So they take me against my will pretty much to the hospital in the ambulance. I'm telling them to call security. It's going to be a long night. I'm super angry. I'm literally thinking like, this is my body. I get to decide what happens to it, all this kinds of stuff. And which isn't the smartest thing to do, because what are they going to do? They're going to call the hospital and they're going to say, "We've got an erratic patient. We need to sedate him," which they were ready to do when I got to the hospital. And I don't remember this, but one of the doctors was smart enough to look at my chart and see that it was actually the year anniversary to me being shot. So he said, "You got to get a scan of his head before you do that." And when they saw the scan of my head, they saw that I was actually suffering from Press syndrome. And Press syndrome is when the pressure within your cranium is so high, it's actually squeezing your brain. And for me, that was happening because of the alcohol abuse, not eating the right things, just all these things intersecting at the same moment, the anniversary, the stress, the PTSD, whatever was going on. And so what they did is they stabilized me, but within 24 hours, I went into physical alcohol withdrawal. So it's a good thing I was at the hospital, because that lasted about, I think, 3 days. I don't remember much of it, which is good and bad. I mean, you'll see in the future why it might be bad, but it ended up shaking out okay. So I'm in alcohol withdrawal, and somewhere in there I must have aspirated, because I ended up with pneumonia in my left lung. That turned into double pneumonia. That turned into my right lung collapsing and me being in a drug-induced coma on a ventilator for 5 weeks. I was in a lot of pain during that coma, mentally, physically, spiritually. I thought when you go into a coma, you get sedated and you get to take a nice nap.
No.
No.
Yeah, that's what I think. No?
No. I was having PTSD dreams in a drug-induced coma, which meant I could never get out. It was like hell. I was trapped. I couldn't get out. And what would happen is they would sedate me. I would go deep. And as you start to come out, before you can move, you start to be able to hear people in the room, and you can almost like sense being touched and stuff like that. And so I'm trying to scream, "Get me out of here." But I can't move. And the one time that I did wake up, and I thought I was choking. Little did I know I had a trach down my throat, right? So I ripped out the ventilator. And so that was a no good thing, because, they had to put it back in and sedate me and all that kind of stuff. So from that point on, I was strapped to the bed. So now I'm in a coma strapped to the bed, having PTSD dreams. And I was in a tremendous amount of physical, mental, spiritual pain. An immense amount of pain. And I just wanted it to be over. And I was praying at this point, "If you're there, God, I need you to finish this. Just let me die. Just let me die." And I don't know when this next part happened. I tried to research if I flatlined or what procedures was I going through, to try to research what happened in the next part of the story. At some point, I'm in that hospital bed, and 2 figures come to the door. They're dressed all in black. There's a male and a female. And they said, "Do you want to get out of here?" I said, "Yes, I do." They said, "Follow me." And I followed them out of the room into the hallway. But as that process happened, the hallway started to get dark. And I started to get scared. And I asked them, "What's going on?" And they looked back at me and said, "Hey, those people don't understand what you're going through, do they?" I'm like, "No, they don't. They would all want to leave us. They're in the same situation, wouldn't they?" "Yes, they would." "Okay, well, let's get out of here." "Okay, let's go." So I keep walking after him, and then it starts getting even darker. And now I can actually hear things in the darkness moving around. And I get scared again. So I kind of say, "What's going on here?" And they said, "Again, you trust us, right? Or you should come with us. They don't understand what the pain you're going through. They would do the same thing," all this kind of stuff. And so keep following us. So I keep following them, just wanting to get away from whatever this pain I was in. And at some point, I could actually hear those things in the darkness start laughing. And then they started scraping me. And right when I turned to leave, the two figures that had led me into the hallway, they turned on me. And it turned into like a 12-person physical assault. The worst, and I won't describe it, but the worst you could ever think, being torn apart and that sort of thing. At some point, I was physically depleted, gave up, and what was a physical assault then turned into about a 12-person sexual assault. So almost like a gang rape. I won't even talk about it. It's awful. But at some point during that, I blacked out. And I came to, and I was in some sort of big room. Now reflecting back, it looks more like a cavern, right? It's also sort of flame lit. I don't know what's going on, but I come around the corner and there's a large figure that I'm looking up at, and it says, "Do you want to get out of here?" I said, "Yes, I do." He says, "Follow me." So I go around the corner and he says, "If you want to get out of here, you have to win this game." I'm like, "All right, explain the game." The game was, there was a large glass pyramid, and it was made out of triangle glass chambers. And whoever, because there was a group of people who wanted to get out of whatever this place is, whoever was going to play this game was going to enter one of those bottom chambers. You were then faced off one by one, and those chambers were then flooded. Whoever didn't drown got to move to the next level. So I kept moving to the next level, the next level, the next level, until I got to the top two triangles, or the chambers that would lead to the top one, which would equal freedom. And for the first time, I could see the person who would die in my stead. I don't know who she was, but she had brown hair, brown eyes. And I realized that I can't get out of whatever this place is by killing somebody. And then I suddenly realized that for the past year, I had been blaming people, that I've been casting shade, that I'd wanted to do physically violent things to people, or, I've been casting shade on people just like I had been chastising them for doing to me. And I suddenly felt just as guilty in that situation. And I decided, again, I can't do this. So as I'm drowning, everything goes black and I start falling back into the black. But for whatever reason, I just said, it came out of my back pocket. For whatever reason, I said, "Jesus, please forgive me." And it wasn't like to save me. It was, "I'm so sorry for the part that I've played." And as I'm falling into the darkness, which I think I'm going to be forever, there's a pinprick of light that appears. And in a pitch black chamber, a pinprick of light is piercing. And I don't know if that light got closer to me or if I got closer to it. But as that process happened, my pain, mentally, physically, and spiritually, started to go down, which is all I was living in. Before I knew it, I was actually in the light, like standing in the light, totally free of pain, mentally, physically, spiritually, and so free of it, it was like it didn't exist. I couldn't even remember what it was about. And I also had this feeling like I had been here before. And I'm standing there and I can't see anything. It's so bright, but I realize I'm holding someone's hand. I look down. It's my little English grandmother. I look ahead of me. It's so bright, again, I can't see, but I look down and I do see yellow bricks, which look like they're making a gold or a yellow road or a path. I look to my left, it's gray. And then I look behind me, it is pitch black, but I can see people floating in the darkness. I can see them in hospital beds. I can see them in wheelchairs, or I can see them having some sort of crisis. They are in pain. And I turned to my grandma, and without moving my lips, I said, "How is it they're so close to where pain doesn't exist? And we're right here." And that's right when I woke up to my wife slapping me in the face, pulling me out of a 5-week coma. Because if you go past 5 weeks on a ventilator, your brain can actually get lazy enough to be like, "Oh, we don't have to breathe anymore." I also found out this year this was going to be their last attempt. If I didn't start breathing, they weren't going to put it back in. I didn't know that until this year. So I still get little like tidbits of what happened in the hospital and how serious it was. Because I think I made a joke of it. And my wife was like, "You realize we weren't going to put it back in." I was like, no, I did not realize that. I thought you were just trying to put it back in, just keep me plugged in. She's like, nope. I'm like, okay. So anyways, I wake up, but I did not come back a changed person. All the pain came back mentally, physically, spiritually. I was trapped in a body that couldn't leave the hospital. They wouldn't let me leave. Someone said I have a drinking problem. I said, I do not. Just totally angry victim, my way or the highway. You know what I mean? Just super kind of like resentful at my situation, very much a victim. And they said, in order to go home, you're going to have to go to a stroke clinic. It's going to take about 14 days. You got to prove that you can walk upstairs, that you can bathe yourself, and that you can use the bathroom. Out of spite, I got that done in like 4 days, like just out of spite. And so anyways, I'm back, and I think like 3 months later, I had stayed sober because I didn't think I had a drinking problem. And I was out to lunch. And I'm like, I'm a grown man. I'm going to have a beer. And so had a beer. And probably the next day I had 2. And then by the weekend, it was a 6-pack. And then it was a 12-pack. And I'm like, well, I don't want to drink that much beer. So I'm back to vodka, and before you know it, I was hiding it. And I was on my way to a therapy appointment, and I had already woken up that day and had 2 vodka drinks already. And I thought I needed a third to go. And so I knew I was in trouble. It's like it's got its claws in me. And I'm on my way to the therapy appointment, and there was a particular place. I know exactly where it was on the highway, when it wasn't like I actually heard a voice, but there was like a message that came through that car that was pretty much to the point: if you take this any further, I can't turn this around. I didn't know what it meant, but at the exact same moment that happened, that ego that I had, that chirping thing on my shoulder that was like, everyone's stupid, they would do it too, no one knows what they're talking about, it jumped out the window on me. It abandoned me in my time of greatest need. And I felt so small and so insignificant. And I realized that I was about to kill myself with alcohol after being shot. And I didn't want to believe in the near-death thing, but it suddenly occurred to me, what if it's true? What if I cross over again and it's because of alcohol, having been given this extra time? And I was scared. Like I was literally like terrified. So I got to my therapy appointment. I was so shaken by it that she actually looked at me and said, what's wrong with you? And I knew as soon as the words came out of my mouth that I was going to have to change, or at least the way she saw me was going to change. But out of desperation, I didn't want to die from it. And I could tell based on the morning it had its hooks on me. I just said, I've been drinking again. It's out of control. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. And she said, if you're going to keep working with me, you're going to do 3 things right now. One is you're going to call your wife who's at work, and you're going to have her go home and get rid of the alcohol. Yes, at work. 2 is you're going to call your parents and you're going to go to their house, since I know where they live, so you don't have time to go to a bar or get a bottle. And then 3 is you're going to go to AA tonight, which is Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was able to do that out of pure desperation. The first meeting I went to, I was literally shaking. In my mind, I didn't need anything the program offered. I just needed to get sober. Simple as that. I just needed to get sober. You guys talk about that. Keep all the other stuff to yourself. I'll do that. I really also didn't like the part about the higher power. That's part of AA. They rely on a higher power greater than ourselves, to help relieve this obsession of alcohol. And I was like, that fine, that works for you, but there is no God, And again, I've been trying to disprove my experience. This is close to the experience. So I'm trying to disprove it, if anything. And if anyone wants to talk about spirituality, I'll have a fight with them, like a verbal altercation. And it got to the point where an old guy goes, fine, Cameron, there is no higher power for you. You have no higher power. So for now, we're going to call that chair sitting next to you your higher power. And I was like, why is that, old man? He goes, because that chair is making better decisions than you are. And I was like, wow, that stung. So I was like, I'll prove you wrong. And so about 3 weeks into the program of just wanting to stay sober, I heard another person say, I have an allergy to alcohol. It's like, that's it. I have an allergy to alcohol. Like, they make Benadryl for a reason. Like, we can get through an allergy. No big deal. I just need to get this drinking under control. And about 3 weeks in, I felt like I was about to explode. It was the middle of the night, and I was desperate enough, and the situation that I was in was painful enough for me to hit my knees and be like, if there's something there, Show me. Show me. If you're really there, show me. And then I literally argued and wrestled with God for like 3 hours, like weeping, doing all these kinds of weird stuff, not understanding it, just wanting to be able to stay sober. But what was weird is when I woke up the next day, I didn't feel like drinking. Strange, right? And so I was like, fine. And I had been doing a little bit of the program, meaning living one day at a time. Because that's all I could handle, one moment at a time, to tell you the truth. Like if I could just get through the next 10 minutes without having a drink, that would be a win, you know? And it would be like, all right, the next 10 minutes, next 10 minutes. Before you knew it, I could get, you know, to day, which was definitely a great thing. And I had to do that for a very, very long time, like a very long time. I combined that as I got healthier. I was doing the therapy. So I'm sober. I'm doing the therapy. I'm on medication, which is meant to stabilize me to handle my PTSD, not numb me out. If we ever talk about medicine in the future, that's the two differences: get numbed out or get stable. I went stable. So I'm stable. I'm watching what I eat. I'm working out. I lose about 100 pounds because I had put on 100 pounds in that year of just doing whatever I wanted. And I'm meditating now. And that was giving me some relief too. But I was still having problems. I got to a year of sobriety. I thought that would be the magic number and everything inside me would click and everything would be set perfect. And it just didn't. And I had gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't think I can live like this. So I had come up with sort of a plan and a timeline for 48 hours. And it happened. I actually had a therapy appointment in that 48 hours. So I thought of this thing. I had this one thing that I'd never talked to anybody about my entire life, ever. Just this one thing. And I figured, what a better opportunity to say it to this therapist today, who it won't have anything to do with, you know, what I plan to do. So she can't tell anybody, but I'll get the secret off my chest and like, we're good to go and I can do my thing and everyone else can live a happy, peaceful life. Cause that's what I thought I was actually doing. I thought I was removing the problem. I was the problem. I was removing the pain. I was removing the issue, the headaches, you know, you just don't want to be that person. And so I get to my therapist's appointment and I tell her, I go, I've got one thing I want to talk about today. She goes, what's that? I go, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I just want to get it off my chest. And she goes, okay. I go, well, I haven't told this to anyone for 30 years. And I was sitting there at 35. And she goes, okay. I go, again, it's not going to matter. I just want to get it off my chest. I'm, you know, not a big deal. But when I was 5 years old, my friend's mom's boyfriend taught 2 5-year-olds an adult game that we played quite a bit. And we actually thought we were part of a club, that it was fun. It even felt good. Okay. But when that individual found out that my dad was a federal police officer, he decided the right way to handle that is telling 2 5-year-olds that God doesn't love us because we sinned. Our parents will get rid of us if they find out, and that he'll kill my friend's mom if I tell my dad. Now, I didn't believe that because my dad's a superhero in my mind, you know, a superhero. But the idea of someone being hurt was new to me. And I used my 5-year-old mind and I was trying to think about it. But it just so happened that within 3 weeks of that happening, my parents had to go from the island back to the United States because my dad had to have a triple bypass. So my dad, my mom, and my little sister went to the States while I stayed on the island with a family I didn't know. I thought they had found out. So my 5-year-old mind basically shut the trap that I had been put in. Because typically what happens to 5-year-olds in that moment, and it happens more often than we think. And what's funny is I tell this part of my presentation when I talk in front of law enforcement, military personnel, or anyone. This is where people end up staying afterwards to talk about the little kid stuff, because they're like, I had something like that happen too. I didn't know I could talk to someone about that. I'm like, me neither. You know what I mean? But so I wasn't going to tell that secret. And I ended up saying it, you know, and so I kept the secret. And that's when the therapist looked back at me and she goes, that's it. And I go, what do you mean that's it? She goes, that's the hook. I go, you're going to have to explain that a little bit better. She goes, all right, let's imagine, and we'll use this too, because I think a lot of people have heard something that parallels this. Let's imagine that 5-year-old Cameron had a trauma happen and it's a piece of string. What you tried to do is take that piece of string, ball it up really tight, and put it way down deep inside you where you couldn't even find it. And I'm like, okay. She goes, then you took an adult trauma and you did the exact same thing. You took that piece of string, you balled it up, you made it really tight, and you jammed it way down in there. But what happened was those two strings got tangled. And as we've been teasing apart the adult PTSD from being shot, there are similar feelings that you encountered in this childhood trauma, which means it's being activated. So in order to process fully the adult thing, we're going to have to look at the childhood thing. And I said, no, thank you. We're not doing that. Not happening, right? Until about 6 months later, and I was really suffering. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. And it took a long time. I was so twisted in it, and I had so much shame over it. I thought I was the greatest disappointment in the world to my family. And I didn't understand how deep it actually went. But anyways, so I was talking about this, the strings being tangled and having to kind of like discuss those things in order to be free, which is definitely not what I wanted to do, but it was the pathway to freedom. And what's even crazier is since I've been able to go back, do the shadow work with the younger self, let him know that he is not shameful or guilty of anything. I had to really understand the concept of the difference between shame and guilt too. Shame's an identity, while guilt is a feeling about something you did. And I had been living in an identity that I had to almost outwork what I had done wrong. And if I did enough good things, maybe God would let me back into heaven. It was so much ingrained in me that when I hit the ground after I got shot, one of the first things I thought after I said my prayer was, I haven't loved enough people to go to heaven. And it just slid through like that. So I started working on it, although I didn't want to work on it. And it was a long pathway, lots of ups, lots of downs, lots of cries, lots of, smiles, lots of growth. But it has become one of my deepest wounds, my deepest shame spot has become one of my greatest weapons. Because now I actually say these things out loud and people go, thank you. Thank you for sharing that experience. It actually helps me. And that was so amazing to me that kind of was one of the strings that led to the podcast. Why are we, because I was guilty of it. I was sitting at home dealing with what I was dealing with, and then going onto social media, looking at people and their sunshine and rainbow posts and thinking that everyone had a great life. And I was the biggest loser in the world. When it turns out we all are coming out of a creek, going into a creek, or already in a shit creek. And we're all pretending like we don't. But what's so interesting is when we sit down and talk about them, it helps people that were around, and it also helps ourselves. Because every time you're forced to articulate any story that's painful, it makes you take the feelings that you're feeling and put them into words, which actually is one of the reasons a lot of doctors not prescribe, but recommend journaling, because that's what you're doing. You're actually putting your feelings into words. And if anyone's ever done that, that can become addicting because it's powerful. You're actually getting those feelings out through the word. Writing it helps even more than saying it. And it's provided a lot of healing for me. It's funny when I talk about therapy, which is kind of sort of along the same lines. I don't say a therapist is going to fix you. What happens is you go to a therapist, and once you become comfortable enough, you start saying the crazy things that you're thinking out loud. And before they can even say anything, you go, whoa, that sounds a little extreme. I didn't realize I felt that way. That doesn't sound like the way I feel. So you get to work on it and kind of like fix what's going on inside you by articulating kind of how you're feeling. And someone gives you a couple guidance here. Well, do you ever think about this? And then you get to think about it and kind of make your way. So when I talk about therapy, I always recommend it. And it isn't something where someone's going to fix you. It's something where you go in to discuss, basically almost with yourself, what's going on. Yeah. And I know that was kind of a rant that I went on there, but we've gone on to do the podcast. We started that in January of 25. We do that on YouTube. We do it on all major podcast platforms. And during the week, we do 2 shorts a day on YouTube Shorts and Facebook and Instagram Reels. So if you guys...
So one little question I have, tell me about Grandma. So she held your hand, but she also directed where your gaze was.
Yeah, my grandma was the only person I believed that God loved me and Jesus loved me after the 5-year-old thing. I would think in my head, if you only knew, but she would say it enough where I believed it. So she was very special to me.
And do you think the way you faced during that shooting made a difference?
Yeah, I've been told it did. If I wouldn't have turned my head, the bullet wouldn't have spun me. It would have actually blown out the back of my head, and I probably wouldn't have survived. I ended up with just a hole in my face the size of a .40 caliber bullet. So it was a .40 full metal jacket. It wasn't meant to stop. It was meant to go through. And because I spun, it actually took some energy and, did the right thing. So if not for Grandma saying that, I wouldn't be here.
Wow. It's nice having your grandma come. You said earlier on your wife was an angel. Just tell me a little bit of what she did that was helpful during those years.
Well, straight out of the gates, I know that my wife was an angel. Probably because I was terrified of her. Meaning, like, it was actually one of those things where I was so scared to ask her if she would go on a date with me or not that I was like, willing to be her friend. You know what I mean? It was like, it was like a weird place to be. And she's actually the one that looked at me one day and said, if you want to kiss me, just go for it. I'm like, okay, here we go. So there's all that. And the other thing that makes her a lot different than anyone else I knew before that is she would cheer me on. If you've ever had someone in your life who, instead of when you go to with a problem, they're like, well, you shouldn't have done that, or, well, you could have done this, or blah, blah, blah. Instead, they're like, okay, well, what do we do now? That's what she does. I mean, those are the exact words she said when I called her from the therapist's office saying, honey, I'm so sorry. This was a new job she was at, the only job that we had. And I'm telling her, I'm drinking again. I'm scared. The first thing she said, I actually expected her to leave, to tell you the truth. I was like, This is a perfect time for you to leave. I've been, I think I was actually saying the words. And the first thing she said is like, okay, what do we do now? And she set the tone with those words for the whole recovery. I gave it everything I had from that point on because I did not want to let her down. Now, this woman, when I didn't want to cooperate, she had to teach me how to walk. Okay. That's one of the first things she had to teach me when I got home from the hospital is how to walk. And she had to do that before work. The first day was walking to the mailbox. The second day was walking to the driveway. The next day was walking to the neighbor's driveway, then the third driveway, then the fourth driveway, then the fifth driveway, until we were going like blocks and blocks and blocks. And this is all before she'd be at work. She also sets the tone with everything I do. I mean, it's just amazing. It's just nuts. Like when I didn't know what medicine to take or if I trusted it, she looked at me and said, if I put it in a tray, will you take it? I said, yes. And she's put it in a tray every day since. And she cheers me on for the good things and doesn't put me down for the bad things, which is key.